Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of procurement KPIs.
Ooh, exciting.
Right. You know those metrics that basically give us like a peek behind the curtain of how companies manage their spending and how they're doing it?
Yes, exactly.
So, we've had a lot of people asking about, really like how do we measure procurement performance? We're going to be looking at an excerpt from Textile Inserat.
Oh, great source.
Yeah, it really digs into the what and the why of these like essential KPIs.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating stuff, because these aren't just numbers in a spreadsheet or in a vacuum. They can reveal so much about a company's operational efficiency and
Mm.
and how those choices actually impact the bottom line, especially in today's economy.
Right. And speaking of the bottom line, let's
Yeah.
break it down. Like before we even get into the nitty-gritty, what are procurement KPIs? Like how would you explain this to like someone who's never even heard of this before?
Yeah, so I think
How?
it helps to picture it like building a house.
Oh,
You wouldn't just start throwing bricks and lumber around, would you?
right. No blueprints, no plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need a plan. You need measurements and a way to track your progress. And that's essentially what procurement KPIs are. They're those blueprints, but for a company's purchasing process.
Ah, I like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they help track everything from how your suppliers are doing to how quickly you're moving inventory.
Okay.
It's all about making sure things are running smoothly and that everything's aligned with the company's larger goals.
So it's more than just saving a buck here and there.
Yes,
It's
definitely.
really about making sure like every purchase is contributing to the success of the company as a whole.
Exactly.
Right. And like you were saying, are we getting the best quality? Are we, sitting on all this unused inventory?
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more interesting. We're not just talking about internal efficiency.
Hmm.
KPIs also let you benchmark against your competition.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Are you getting better deals? Are your deliveries faster than theirs? Understanding these metrics can give you a real edge in a competitive market.
I never thought about it from that angle. That's really interesting. So the source material that we have, it actually breaks down procurement KPIs into four main categories:
Oh.
quality, inventory management, delivery, and then everyone's favorite, cost saving.
Of course.
But I'm guessing we shouldn't just get laser focused on one category, right?
You're absolutely right.
Mm.
And think about it like a web. They're all interconnected.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you just obsess over cutting costs and you just choose the cheapest supplier possible,
Yeah.
well, what can happen? Then your delivery times might go way up, or you're suddenly dealing with tons of product defects.
That makes sense.
So yeah, it's really about finding the right balance across all those areas.
Balance, yeah. So give me like a real world example of how each of these categories like actually plays out like in a real business.
Okay, so let's start with quality. Imagine you're a clothing company and you're about to launch this amazing new line.
Yeah.
You order thousands of units, but when they arrive, half of them have the logo printed Truckit.
Oh no.
That's a nightmare.
Okay.
And that's where the supplier defect rate KPI comes in.
Okay.
It measures the percentage of faulty products you get from a supplier.
Gotcha.
And, if you ignore that metric, well, your entire launch could be a disaster.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a really good example. So what about inventory management?
Okay, so for this one, think of a tech company with a warehouse full of last year's phone model.
Oh.
Now they're stuck with this outdated inventory. Their storage costs are through the roof and it's eating into their profits.
Yeah.
And that's a classic example of where the inventory aging KPI is really valuable.
Got it.
It tracks how long items are just sitting around in your inventory,
Okay.
and it helps you avoid these really expensive stockpiles.
So basically making sure that your money isn't just gathering dust on a shelf somewhere.
Exactly.
Okay. And then how about delivery? I feel like we've all been on the frustrating end of waiting like weeks for an online order.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So how do KPIs play into that?
So that's where supplier lead times come in.
Okay.
This measures how long it takes to actually get an order delivered.
Gotcha.
And in a fast-paced industry, a supplier with really long lead times can cripple your ability to meet demand.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then finally, cost saving.
Right, the crowd pleaser.
Right, like everybody wants to save money, so I'm assuming it's more than just haggling for a lower price.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cost reduction looks at the savings you achieve through all sorts of strategies.
Okay.
Things like negotiating bulk discounts or maybe finding a new supplier with lower base costs.
Yeah, I see.
It's about finding that sweet spot between price and value.
Price and value. Got it. So within each of these categories, the source we have digs into even more specific KPIs.
Yeah.
So let's start with quality. What other kind of metrics should we be looking at there?
Well, one of the most crucial ones is purchase order accuracy.
Okay.
So this tracks whether suppliers are delivering the right products in the right quantities and on time. If this metric is constantly low, well, then you've got major problems either with communication or with how reliable your suppliers are.
Right. Yeah, that's going to cause some headaches down the line, I can imagine.
Exactly.
So, are there any quality KPIs that look beyond just the product itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's also compliance rate.
Okay.
This measures how well a company is following regulations and contract terms when they're making purchases.
So this is about more than just the quality of the product itself.
Exactly. It's about managing risk.
Yeah.
You want to avoid those legal issues or fines that can come from questionable sourcing practices.
So it's about making sure everything's above board, ethically sourced, and legally sound.
Exactly.
Okay. Are there any other quality KPIs we should be thinking about?
Well, we already touched on supplier defect rate, but
Yeah.
it's worth digging deeper because it's not just about the percentage of faulty goods.
Okay.
Analyzing the types of defects you're seeing can tell you a lot. Is it a problem with the supplier's processes, or is there actually a flaw in the product design itself?
That's a really good point because then you're getting to the root of the problem
Exactly.
instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of these KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
They can uncover so much hidden information about how a company's really operating.
Wow, so we're only in the quality category, and I'm already seeing like how much insight we can gain from these metrics.
I know, right? And we still have 3 more categories to unpack.
Oh, wow, this is going to be fun.
What do you want to tackle next?
Well, let's move on to inventory management. I think that's a good one to go to next. All right, let's move on to inventory management. We talked about inventory aging.
Right.
But what other KPIs kind of fall under this category?
So another big one is inventory turnover ratio,
Okay.
which basically measures how quickly a company is selling its inventory.
Okay.
A high turnover usually means they're managing things efficiently,
Makes sense.
but it's super important to compare it to industry averages.
Right. Because I imagine.
Yeah, a grocery store is going to have much higher turnover than like a car dealership.
Right. Totally different.
Right. Exactly. So
Yeah.
context really matters here.
Yeah. It's not just about chasing the highest number possible.
Exactly.
What can happen if you focus too much on like a high turnover rate?
Well, you might end up with stock shortages all the time,
Ah, okay.
which obviously leads to lost sales and frustrated customers.
Right. You don't want that.
Exactly. Or you might end up prioritizing those really fast-moving items
Okay.
and neglect the slower-moving ones, which could actually be more profitable in the long run.
Right. So it's about finding that balance again.
Always about balance.
Okay. Are there any other inventory management KPIs we should know about?
Definitely. So there's also inventory carrying cost.
Okay.
And this looks at all the expenses that come with storing and managing your inventory.
Gotcha.
So think warehouse rent utilities, security insurance,
Right.
even the cost of the staff who manage it all.
Wow. It really adds up.
It does. So minimizing those carrying costs is super important.
Especially, I imagine, in industries where maybe goods are perishable.
Yes, especially.
Or, where storage space is just really expensive.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's shift gears to the delivery category.
All right.
We talked about supplier lead times,
Yeah.
but what else impacts a company's ability to like get those goods where they need to be when they need to be there?
So one really telling metric is emergency purchase rate.
Okay.
This tracks how often a company has to make like unplanned purchases to avoid running out of stock.
Yeah.
A high rate here usually means you've got poor planning or unreliable suppliers,
Gotcha.
or maybe your demand forecasting is off.
So it's like, that last minute scramble to the grocery store because you forgot a key ingredient,
Exactly.
except on a much larger scale.
And probably a lot more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So what other delivery KPIs are really crucial?
So there's vendor availability.
Okay.
This basically measures how good your suppliers are at fulfilling those urgent orders,
Okay.
which is super important in industries with like fluctuating demand or if you need to respond to market changes quickly.
Yeah.
A reliable vendor with high availability, they can be a huge competitive advantage.
Especially like, in times of disruption, we've seen that a lot in recent years with supply chains.
Oh, absolutely. Having a backup supplier or diversifying your sourcing can be a lifesaver in those situations.
Yeah, you gotta have a plan B.
Exactly. Another KPI here is purchase order cycle time,
Okay.
which looks at the whole process from when a request is submitted to when you actually receive the goods.
So basically, like a streamlined cycle means a faster turnaround,
Exactly.
which is crucial when time is of the essence.
Exactly, especially for time-sensitive materials or projects.
Okay, makes sense. All right, let's move on to the category. I think that gets the most
The
attention.
exciting one.
Cost saving, right? Everybody wants to save money.
Of course.
We've talked about cost reduction.
Yeah.
What are some of the other KPIs that fall under this umbrella?
Well, there's procurement ROI.
Okay.
This is basically like evaluating the financial performance of your entire procurement department.
Oh.
You're basically asking for every dollar we put into procurement, how much value are we getting back?
And how do you actually measure that return?
So you calculate it by dividing the annual cost savings you achieve
Okay.
by your annual procurement costs.
Got it.
So a higher ROI obviously means your department is doing a good job of finding savings and optimizing spending.
So it's not just about cutting costs, but it's actually proving the value that you're bringing to the table.
Exactly.
Okay. We also talked about cost avoidance.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a bit more on how that's different from cost reduction?
Sure. So cost reduction is about achieving those actual realized savings,
Okay.
like getting a lower price on a specific item.
Gotcha.
Cost avoidance is about preventing future costs through proactive measures.
Okay, so if you invest in technology that automates some manual process,
Exactly.
which might cost money up front but could save you money in the long run.
Exactly. Because you're saving on labor and potential errors.
Okay, so it's about taking that long-term view.
Thinking ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any challenges associated with measuring cost avoidance? Because it seems a little bit more abstract than cost reduction.
Yeah, it definitely can be tricky.
Yeah.
Because you're essentially trying to quantify something that didn't happen.
Right.
So a common approach is to estimate the cost of a potential problem
Okay.
and then calculate the savings you achieve by preventing it.
So it's like a what-if scenario.
Exactly. It requires some forecasting and some analysis.
Okay, so what other cost-saving KPIs are important?
So there's also spend under management.
Yeah.
This tracks the percentage of a company's spending that's actively managed by the procurement team.
Got it.
The higher the percentage, the greater the potential for finding savings.
Okay.
It's about making sure purchases are made strategically
Yeah.
and not just happening randomly across different departments.
So it's like having a central command for spending.
Exactly, which gives you better control and visibility.
Okay, and what about KPIs that look at the external market and how that impacts costs?
Right, so there's price competitiveness.
Oh.
This looks at the level of competition among suppliers for a given product or service.
Right.
More competition generally means better prices and more power for the buyer.
Makes sense.
Companies can track this by monitoring how many bids they get for a purchase or by analyzing market trends.
So it's about staying informed and leveraging that competition to your advantage.
Exactly.
I'm noticing a theme here. It seems like a lot of these KPIs aren't just about internal performance, but also about understanding your place in the market as a whole.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
Procurement is very much connected to external forces.
Mm-hmm.
Things that impact your costs, your suppliers, and your ability to deliver value to your customers.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We looked at the 4 main categories of procurement KPIs. We dug into specific metrics within each one.
We did.
What are some of the key takeaways from Textile Insurat that you think our listeners should really remember? It seems like the big takeaway is that these KPIs, they really offer a window into how a company is running things,
Yeah, like how efficient are they, and are they using their resources wisely?
Exactly. And the source we're looking at, Textile Insurat, it really emphasizes that using these metrics, well, it's not just about checking boxes.
No, it's about actually using the data to make things better.
Right. So it's about using data to tell a story.
Exactly. And the story can show you where things are working well and where there might be some hiccups.
So where the bottlenecks are.
Exactly. And these KPIs, they can also help connect procurement to a company's big goals.
Right. So it's not just about buying stuff.
It's about making sure those purchases actually support what the company's trying to achieve.
So whether that's making more profit or expanding or maybe even becoming more sustainable.
Exactly.
So it's about being a strategic partner, not just a department that buys stuff.
Precisely. And I know it can feel overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many KPIs out there.
Yeah, definitely.
But the ones we've talked about today, they're a great starting point.
Okay, good. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is that these KPIs, they're not just for procurement people.
Oh, that's interesting.
Anyone who makes decisions, whether it's in business or in their personal life, they can benefit from understanding these metrics.
So it's about thinking critically about how you're spending your resources.
Exactly. Are you getting the most bang for your buck?
I like that. Yeah, so imagine you're planning a big home renovation.
Okay.
Understanding things like cost avoidance could help you decide, should we invest in better materials now to avoid those costly repairs later?
Exactly. Or knowing about supplier lifetimes could help you avoid delays and keep the project on track.
So it's about applying these principles to everyday decisions.
Absolutely. It's about being a smarter decision maker.
Okay, so before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with something to think about.
Okay.
Think back to a time when you were like, man, this company's procurement could have been way better.
I've been there.
Right? Maybe they ran out of something, or the return process was a nightmare, or they were just making choices that didn't align with their values.
Yeah, I've seen it all.
Now, put yourself in the shoes of their procurement team.
Right.
What KPIs could they have used to fix that issue and prevent it from happening again?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's a way to connect these concepts to the real world and think about how these metrics can lead to positive change.
I love it.
So that's a wrap for our deep dive into procurement KPIs. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you on the next one.